Question 1. A California resident legally carrying a concealed firearm is pulled over for a routine traffic stop. What is the most widely recommended first action regarding the firearm? A. Immediately reach for your concealed carry permit to have it ready for inspection. B. Keep your hands visible on the steering wheel and, when prompted, calmly inform the officer you are carrying a concealed firearm and its location. C. Remain silent about the firearm unless the officer specifically asks if you have any weapons. D. Place the firearm on the dashboard in plain view before the officer approaches the vehicle. Answer: B. Keep your hands visible on the steering wheel and, when prompted, calmly inform the officer you are carrying a concealed firearm and its location. When stopped by law enforcement while legally carrying a concealed firearm, it is crucial to prioritize officer safety and clearly communicate. The recommended procedure is to keep your hands visible, typically on the steering wheel, and wait for the officer to approach and initiate conversation. Once the officer has engaged you, calmly and clearly state that you are a licensed concealed weapon carrier and disclose the firearm's location, then follow all further instructions. This proactive, yet non-threatening, declaration helps prevent misunderstandings and ensures a safer interaction for everyone involved. Question 2. Under California law, a person is generally prohibited from possessing any firearm in which of the following locations, even with a valid concealed carry weapon, CCW, permit? A. A public park with posted, "No firearms," signs. B. A private business that has not posted, "No firearms," signs. C. Within 1,000 feet of a K-12 public or private school, commonly known as a gun-free school zone. D. A state-licensed bar or restaurant that serves alcohol, provided the permit holder is not consuming alcohol. Answer: C. Within 1,000 feet of a K-12 public or private school, commonly known as a gun-free school zone. California law designates areas within 1,000 feet of K-12 public or private schools as gun-free school zones, where the possession of firearms is generally prohibited, even for individuals with a valid concealed carry weapon, CCW, permit, with very limited exceptions not applicable to general carry. This specific restriction is designed to protect children and maintain safety in educational environments. Understanding these specific prohibited locations is critical for all firearm owners, especially those with CCW permits, to ensure compliance with the law. Always verify the specific rules for any location you plan to enter with a firearm. Question 3. Which of the following scenarios would most likely constitute brandishing a firearm under California law? A. Displaying a holstered firearm while walking into a bank, which is openly visible because your shirt rolled up. B. Drawing a firearm and holding it defensively in response to an immediate, credible threat of severe bodily injury or death. C. Drawing a firearm from a holster and gesturing with it during a verbal argument, without pointing it at anyone. D. Openly carrying an unloaded firearm in a gun case while transporting it to a shooting range. Answer: C. Drawing a firearm from a holster and gesturing with it during a verbal argument, without pointing it at anyone. Brandishing a firearm, as defined by California Penal Code, involves drawing or exhibiting a firearm in a rude, angry, or threatening manner, or in any manner, without legal cause, that would terrify a reasonable person. Drawing a firearm and gesturing with it during a verbal argument, even if not directly pointed, implies a threat and would likely be interpreted as brandishing. This is distinct from legally using a firearm in self-defense, which requires an immediate and credible threat to life or serious bodily injury, or safely transporting a firearm. Always remember that any display of a firearm outside of legitimate self-defense or approved range use can have serious legal consequences. Question 4. In California, if a person legally carrying a concealed firearm is involved in a collision while driving, what is generally the most appropriate initial action regarding the firearm if no immediate threat exists? A. Secure the firearm in a locked container in the vehicle's trunk, then exchange information with the other driver. B. Exit the vehicle, check on the other parties, and then immediately inform responding law enforcement about the firearm. C. Keep hands visible, remain in the vehicle, and wait for law enforcement to arrive, then inform them about the firearm and its location when appropriate. D. Do not mention the firearm unless directly asked by law enforcement, to avoid causing unnecessary alarm during an already stressful situation. Answer: C. Keep hands visible, remain in the vehicle, and wait for law enforcement to arrive, then inform them about the firearm and its location when appropriate. In the event of a traffic collision, the primary concern is safety and adherence to proper procedures. If you are legally carrying a concealed firearm and no immediate threat is present, the most responsible action is to remain in your vehicle with your hands visible, minimizing any sudden movements that could be misinterpreted. When law enforcement arrives and begins to interact with you, calmly and clearly inform them that you are a licensed concealed weapon carrier and disclose the firearm's location, then follow their instructions. This approach prioritizes de-escalation and ensures officer safety by giving them accurate information about potential hazards. Question 5. Which of the following actions is prohibited for a driver in California? A. Making a U-turn at an intersection with a green light when no U-turn sign is present. B. Using a handheld wireless telephone for any purpose while operating a motor vehicle, even when stopped at a red light. C. Driving with the low-beam headlights on during daylight hours to increase visibility. D. Exceeding the posted speed limit by 5 miles per hour on a freeway when traffic is flowing smoothly. Answer: B. Using a handheld wireless telephone for any purpose while operating a motor vehicle, even when stopped at a red light. California law prohibits drivers from using a handheld wireless telephone for any purpose, including talking or texting, while operating a motor vehicle. This restriction applies even when the vehicle is temporarily stopped at a red light or in traffic, as the vehicle is still considered operating. The intent of this law is to reduce distracted driving and enhance road safety for everyone. To comply with the law, drivers must use a hands-free device or pull over safely before using a cell phone. Question 6. What is the legal requirement for transporting a handgun in a vehicle in California if it is not carried concealed under a valid permit? A. It must be stored unloaded and in a locked container, separate from ammunition. B. It can be carried loaded in the glove compartment, provided the owner is a legal resident. C. It must be openly displayed on the dashboard, unloaded, with a "Do Not Touch" sign. D. It can be carried loaded in a backpack in the back seat, as long as the backpack is zipped closed. Answer: A. It must be stored unloaded and in a locked container, separate from ammunition. In California, if you are transporting a handgun in a vehicle without a valid concealed carry weapon (CCW) permit, it must be transported unloaded and stored in a locked container. This container cannot be easily accessed from the passenger compartment. Ammunition may be transported in the same container, but it must not be loaded into the firearm or its magazine if the magazine is inserted into the firearm. This law aims to prevent unauthorized access and accidental discharges during transport. Always ensure your firearm is securely stored and inaccessible to unauthorized individuals, especially when in a vehicle. Question 7. A person legally carrying a concealed firearm walks into a private business in California. The business owner asks the person to leave the premises because they have a "no firearms" policy, although no signs are posted. What is the legal obligation of the concealed carry permit holder? A. They are not obligated to leave, as no firearms signs were posted, and they have a legal permit. B. They must immediately leave the premises, failure to do so could result in a charge of trespass. C. They can politely refuse and explain that their permit allows them to carry concealed. D. They should secure the firearm in their vehicle and then return to the business. Answer: B. They must immediately leave the premises, failure to do so could result in a charge of trespass. In California, private property owners have the right to establish their own rules regarding firearms on their premises, regardless of whether signs are posted. If a private business owner asks a legally carrying concealed permit holder to leave due to a "no firearms" policy, the permit holder is legally obligated to comply with that request. Failing to leave after being asked by the property owner or their agent could result in a charge of trespassing, even if you are otherwise legally carrying a firearm. Always respect private property rights and the requests of business owners. Question 8. What is the primary purpose of the Firearm Safety Certificate, FSC, in California? A. To serve as a permit for concealed carry of a firearm. B. To certify that an individual has completed an advanced tactical shooting course. C. To demonstrate a basic understanding of firearm safety laws and handling requirements before purchasing or acquiring a firearm. D. To register all firearms owned by a California resident with the State Department of Justice. Answer: C. To demonstrate a basic understanding of firearm safety laws and handling requirements before purchasing or acquiring a firearm. The Firearm Safety Certificate, FSC, is a crucial component of California's firearm laws, requiring individuals to pass a written test on basic firearm safety and applicable laws. This certificate is generally required before a person can purchase or acquire any firearm in California, ensuring that the buyer possesses a fundamental knowledge of safe firearm handling, storage, and relevant legal responsibilities. It is important to remember that the FSC is not a permit to carry a concealed weapon. It is solely focused on promoting responsible firearm ownership at the point of acquisition. Question 9. During a traffic stop, if a law enforcement officer observes an openly visible, legally possessed firearm in a vehicle in California, e.g., in a holster on the seat, not in a locked container, what is the most likely and appropriate immediate action the officer will take? A. Instruct the driver to exit the vehicle and place their hands on the vehicle's roof, then secure the firearm. B. Ask the driver to hand the firearm over immediately. C. Advise the driver that open carry in a vehicle is generally illegal and issue a warning. D. Ignore the firearm if the driver has a valid concealed carry permit. Answer: A. Instruct the driver to exit the vehicle and place their hands on the vehicle's roof, then secure the firearm. While a firearm owner may believe they are acting legally, law enforcement officers prioritize safety during a traffic stop, and any visible firearm will escalate the situation from their perspective. Even if a firearm is legally possessed, an officer observing it will likely issue commands for the driver to exit the vehicle with hands visible and will secure the firearm to ensure officer and public safety before proceeding with the traffic stop. This is a standard procedure to mitigate any perceived threat, regardless of the driver's intent. Always be prepared for such an interaction if a firearm is visible in your vehicle. Question 10. In California, if you legally possess a firearm and are approached by a law enforcement officer who asks you if you have any weapons, what is the most appropriate response? A. State, "I do not answer questions without my lawyer present." B. Refuse to answer, as you believe it violates your Fifth Amendment rights. C. Truthfully and calmly state that you are carrying a firearm and its location, then follow the officer's instructions. D. Immediately present your firearm safety certificate. Answer: C. Truthfully and calmly state that you are carrying a firearm and its location, then follow the officer's instructions. While you generally have the right to remain silent, when specifically asked by a law enforcement officer if you possess a weapon, especially a firearm, it is always recommended to truthfully and calmly disclose its presence and location, particularly if you are legally carrying it. This immediate and honest disclosure helps to de-escalate potential tension, demonstrates cooperation, and provides vital information to the officer for their safety. After disclosing, always follow the officer's clear instructions regarding the firearm. Question 11. Which of the following is a key component of responsible firearm storage, especially in a home with children or unauthorized individuals? A. Storing the firearm loaded in a bedside nightstand for quick access. B. Storing the firearm and ammunition separately in easily accessible, unlocked drawers. C. Storing the firearm unloaded in a locked container or gun safe, with ammunition stored separately and securely. D. Hiding the firearm under a mattress, ensuring it's out of sight. Answer: C. Storing the firearm unloaded in a locked container or gun safe, with ammunition stored separately and securely. Responsible firearm storage, particularly in homes with children or other unauthorized individuals, is paramount for preventing accidental discharges, theft, and misuse. The safest practice is to store firearms unloaded in a sturdy, locked container, gun safe, or with a California Department of Justice approved locking device, while keeping ammunition stored separately and securely. This multi-layered approach ensures that unauthorized persons cannot easily access or use the firearm or ammunition. Always prioritize securing your firearms to prevent tragedies. Question 12. If a California concealed carry weapon, CCW, permit holder is stopped for a non-moving violation, e.g., expired registration, and has a legally concealed firearm, what is the recommended procedure for handling the interaction? A. Hand the officer your CCW permit immediately upon presentation of your driver's license. B. Declare the firearm and its location only if the officer makes a move towards your waistband or vehicle's interior. C. Place your hands on the steering wheel, inform the officer of the firearm and its location when contact is made, and await instructions. D. Do not declare the firearm, as it is concealed and not relevant to a non-moving violation. Answer: C. Place your hands on the steering wheel, inform the officer of the firearm and its location when contact is made, and await instructions. Regardless of the type of traffic stop, the procedure for a CCW permit holder remains consistent to ensure a safe interaction. Upon being stopped, keep your hands clearly visible on the steering wheel. When the officer makes contact, calmly and clearly state that you are a licensed concealed weapon carrier and disclose the firearm's location. Then, patiently await and follow the officer's specific instructions. This approach prioritizes clear communication and helps to prevent any misunderstandings that could arise from the presence of a concealed weapon. Question 13. Which of the following conditions would disqualify a person from obtaining a Firearm Safety Certificate, FSC, in California? A. Having only resided in California for 6 months. B. Not owning a firearm previously. C. Being prohibited from possessing a firearm under state or federal law, e.g., due to certain felony convictions or domestic violence restraining orders. D. Being under 21 years of age but over 18 years of age. Answer: C. Being prohibited from possessing a firearm under state or federal law, e.g., due to certain felony convictions or domestic violence restraining orders. The Firearm Safety Certificate, FSC, is a prerequisite for purchasing most firearms in California, but an individual must first be legally eligible to possess a firearm. If a person is prohibited from possessing firearms under state or federal law due to disqualifying factors such as certain felony convictions, specific misdemeanor convictions, or active domestic violence restraining orders, they are also ineligible to obtain an FSC. The FSC is a certificate of safety knowledge, but it does not override fundamental prohibitions on firearm ownership. Question 14. What is the primary purpose of a red flag law, also known as a Gun Violence Restraining Order, GVRO, in California? A. To allow law enforcement to confiscate all firearms from anyone suspected of a misdemeanor. B. To temporarily remove firearms from individuals who pose a significant risk of harming themselves or others. C. To permanently ban specific types of firearms deemed unsafe by the state. D. To require all firearm owners to register their weapons with local police departments annually. Answer: B. To temporarily remove firearms from individuals who pose a significant risk of harming themselves or others. California's Gun Violence Restraining Order, GVRO, law, often referred to as a red flag law, allows family members, housemates, employers, co-workers, or law enforcement to petition a court to temporarily remove firearms from individuals deemed to pose a significant risk of harming themselves or others. This measure is intended as a preventative tool to reduce gun violence in situations where there is credible evidence of immediate danger. The orders are temporary and subject to due process, aiming to provide a safety window while an individual's mental state or violent tendencies are addressed. Question 15. When driving in California, under what circumstances can a person legally use a cell phone for navigation? A. Only if the phone is held in one hand and operated by the other. B. Only if the phone is mounted on the dashboard or windshield and operated by a single swipe or tap. C. Only if the vehicle is completely stopped and parked, not just at a red light. D. Only if the driver is a passenger, not the operator of the vehicle. Answer: B. Only if the phone is mounted on the dashboard or windshield and operated by a single swipe or tap. California law strictly regulates cell phone use while driving to prevent distracted driving. A driver may only use a cell phone for navigation or other functions if the device is mounted on the dashboard or windshield in a manner that does not obstruct the driver's view, and it can be operated by a single swipe or tap. Any other interaction, such as holding the phone or multiple touches, is illegal, even when stopped at a red light. Prioritize safety by setting up your navigation before driving and using hands-free or mounted devices correctly. Question 16. A person legally carrying a concealed firearm decides to stop for a drink at a state-licensed bar that serves alcohol. What is the legal implication in California for the CCW permit holder? A. They can enter the bar with the concealed firearm as long as they do not consume any alcohol. B. They are prohibited from carrying a firearm into any establishment primarily engaged in the sale of alcohol for consumption on the premises. C. They can enter the bar and consume alcohol, as long as they are not visibly intoxicated. D. They must declare their firearm to the bartender upon entry. Answer: B. They are prohibited from carrying a firearm into any establishment primarily engaged in the sale of alcohol for consumption on the premises. In California, a concealed carry weapon, CCW, permit does not grant permission to carry a firearm into establishments primarily engaged in the sale of alcohol for on-site consumption, such as bars. This prohibition applies whether or not the permit holder intends to consume alcohol. The law is designed to prevent the combination of firearms and environments where alcohol consumption could impair judgment and increase the risk of misuse. Always be aware of restricted locations to ensure compliance with your CCW permit's limitations. Question 17. Which of the following actions is a key step to take if your firearm is lost or stolen in California? A. Immediately purchase a replacement firearm to avoid being without protection. B. Wait a few weeks to see if it turns up before reporting it. C. Promptly report the loss or theft to a local law enforcement agency. D. Report it only if you suspect it was used in a crime. Answer: C. Promptly report the loss or theft to a local law enforcement agency. In California, if your firearm is lost or stolen, it is a legal requirement and a critical safety measure to promptly report the incident to a local law enforcement agency. Reporting ensures that if the firearm is later involved in a crime, law enforcement has records of its ownership transfer and can track its path. This also helps protect you from potential liability if the firearm is misused by another party. Responsible firearm ownership includes reporting losses or thefts immediately. Question 18. What is the primary reason for California's strict regulations on firearm modifications, such as those related to assault weapons, features? A. To make firearms more aesthetically pleasing. B. To reduce the rate of accidental discharges among sport shooters. C. To prevent firearms from being easily converted into fully automatic weapons. D. To restrict features that law enforcement views as contributing to military-style effectiveness and public danger. Answer: D. To restrict features that law enforcement views as contributing to military-style effectiveness and public danger. California's assault weapons laws and related regulations on firearm modifications are primarily designed to restrict features that are associated with military-style firearms and are believed by lawmakers and law enforcement to enhance a weapon's offensive capabilities or potential for mass harm. These laws aim to control the types of firearms available to the general public, focusing on characteristics like detachable magazines in combination with certain pistol grips, adjustable stocks, or flash suppressors. The intent is to reduce perceived public danger by regulating features that make firearms more effective in high-capacity or rapid-fire scenarios. Question 19. In California, which document must typically be presented to a licensed firearm dealer, FFL, when purchasing a handgun? A. A hunting license. B. A valid state-issued driver's license or identification card and a Firearm Safety Certificate, FSC. C. A copy of your birth certificate. D. A letter of recommendation from a local police chief. Answer: B. A valid state-issued driver's license or identification card and a Firearm Safety Certificate, FSC. When purchasing a handgun from a licensed firearm dealer, FFL, in California, the buyer must present a valid state-issued driver's license or identification card as proof of identity and residency. Additionally, they must possess a valid Firearm Safety Certificate, FSC, which demonstrates their basic knowledge of firearm safety laws. These documents are essential for completing the background check process and ensuring compliance with California's strict firearm sales regulations. Always have your identification and FSC ready when making a firearm purchase. Question 20. If a person with a valid California CCW permit needs to exit their vehicle and temporarily leave their concealed firearm in it, what is the safest and most legally compliant method of storage? A. Leave it loaded under the driver's seat for quick access upon return. B. Place it unloaded in a locked container, such as a trunk or a locked box not readily accessible, separate from the passenger compartment. C. Conceal it under a blanket on the back seat, as it is still within the vehicle. D. Leave it loaded in the glove compartment if the glove compartment is locked. Answer: B. Place it unloaded in a locked container, such as a trunk or a locked box not readily accessible, separate from the passenger compartment. Even with a CCW permit, if you must leave a handgun unattended in a vehicle, California law generally requires it to be unloaded and secured in a locked container. This container must be placed in the vehicle's trunk or in a locked container that is not readily accessible from the passenger compartment. This storage method prevents unauthorized access and potential theft, demonstrating responsible firearm ownership and adhering to state regulations regarding unattended firearms in vehicles. Question 21. What is the minimum waiting period required by California law before a firearm can be transferred to a purchaser by a licensed dealer? A. 3 business days. B. 5 calendar days. C. 10 calendar days. D. 15 business days. Answer: C. 10 calendar days. California law mandates a minimum 10 calendar day waiting period between the purchase of any firearm from a licensed dealer and its actual delivery to the buyer. This waiting period applies to all firearm transactions through an FFL, regardless of whether the buyer has a Firearm Safety Certificate or a concealed carry weapon permit. The purpose of this waiting period is to provide a cooling-off period and allow time for thorough background checks to be completed, aiming to prevent impulsive acts of violence. Question 22. In the context of California firearm laws, what does unloaded generally mean for a firearm when transporting it in a vehicle without a CCW permit? A. No ammunition is stored anywhere in the vehicle. B. No ammunition is in the firing chamber or an attached magazine, but ammunition can be stored elsewhere in the vehicle. C. The firearm is completely disassembled. D. The firearm's safety is engaged. Answer: B. No ammunition is in the firing chamber or an attached magazine, but ammunition can be stored elsewhere in the vehicle. For the purpose of transporting a firearm in a vehicle in California without a concealed carry permit, unloaded means that there is no round in the chamber, and no magazine is inserted into the firearm with ammunition in it. This does not mean ammunition cannot be present in the vehicle. Ammunition can be stored separately from the firearm, or even in the same locked container, as long as it is not loaded into the firearm or its attached magazine. This regulation aims to prevent accidental discharges during transport. Question 23. If a California CCW permit holder is involved in a lawful act of self-defense using a firearm, what is the crucial immediate step after the threat has been neutralized and it is safe to do so? A. Clean the firearm and put it away to avoid evidence tampering. B. Immediately leave the scene to avoid arrest. C. Call 911 to report the incident, secure the scene, and comply with responding law enforcement. D. Approach any witnesses to collect their statements. Answer: C. Call 911 to report the incident, secure the scene, and comply with responding law enforcement. After a lawful act of self-defense involving a firearm, and once the immediate threat is neutralized and safety is established, it is critically important to immediately call 911 to report the incident to law enforcement. Do not touch or move anything, including the firearm, if possible, to preserve the scene as evidence. Clearly state that you were involved in a self-defense incident and that you require police assistance, then cooperate fully with responding officers, providing factual information and following their instructions without making additional statements until legal counsel is present. Your priority is to ensure the proper legal process is initiated and the scene is secured. Question 24. A driver is pulled over by the California Highway Patrol, CHP. The driver is acting agitated and making quick, unannounced movements inside the vehicle. What is the most likely initial response from the CHP officer? A. The officer will calmly ask the driver to explain their movements. B. The officer will approach the vehicle quickly and attempt to open the door to gain control. C. The officer will maintain distance, issue verbal commands for the driver to stop moving, and keep hands visible. D. The officer will ignore the movements and proceed with the traffic stop as normal. Answer: C. The officer will maintain distance, issue verbal commands for the driver to stop moving, and keep hands visible. During a traffic stop, officer safety is paramount, and unpredictable movements by a driver are perceived as a potential threat. If a driver is acting agitated and making quick, unannounced movements, a California Highway Patrol, CHP, officer will typically maintain a safe distance, often from behind their patrol car or in a tactical position, and issue clear, firm verbal commands to the driver to stop moving and to keep their hands visible. This allows the officer to assess the situation and ensure their safety before approaching the vehicle. Always keep your hands visible and follow officer commands to de-escalate any stop. Question 25. Which of the following is considered a prohibited person under California and federal law, generally making them ineligible to possess a firearm? A. A person who has previously filed for bankruptcy. B. A person who has been convicted of a felony or certain misdemeanor crimes of domestic violence. C. A person who has overdue library books. D. A person who lives in a different county than where their firearm safety certificate was issued. Answer: B. A person who has been convicted of a felony or certain misdemeanor crimes of domestic violence. Both California and federal laws prohibit individuals from possessing firearms if they fall into certain categories, often referred to as prohibited persons. A common and significant disqualifier is a conviction for a felony offense or specific misdemeanor crimes of domestic violence. These prohibitions are in place to prevent firearms from being in the hands of individuals deemed a risk to public safety. It is critical for all individuals to understand if they are legally eligible to possess a firearm before attempting to acquire or carry one. Question 26. In California, which of these locations is generally considered a sensitive place, where concealed carry is prohibited, even with a valid CCW permit, as per 2024/2025 updates? A. A private residence with a "No Firearms" sign. B. A sidewalk adjacent to a public park. C. A public library. D. A shopping mall that does not explicitly prohibit firearms. Answer: C. A public library. Recent updates to California law, particularly Senate Bill 2, SB 2, have expanded the list of sensitive places where carrying a concealed firearm is prohibited, even for those with a valid concealed carry weapon (CCW) permit. Public libraries are now explicitly included in this expanded list, alongside other locations like public parks, playgrounds, government buildings, and places of worship. Understanding these specific prohibitions is crucial for CCW holders to ensure compliance with the law and avoid legal penalties. Question 27. What is the primary purpose of registering a newly purchased handgun with the California Department of Justice, DOJ? A. To allow the DOJ to track the buyer's movements with the firearm. B. To ensure the buyer has a valid Firearm Safety Certificate. C. To create a record of firearm ownership for law enforcement purposes, aiding in investigations and recovery of stolen firearms. D. To automatically enroll the buyer in a state-sponsored shooting club. Answer: C. To create a record of firearm ownership for law enforcement purposes, aiding in investigations and recovery of stolen firearms. In California, the registration of newly purchased handguns, and all firearms since 2014, with the Department of Justice, DOJ, serves to create a centralized record of firearm ownership. This record is primarily for law enforcement purposes, assisting in investigations where a firearm's history is relevant, such as in criminal cases or the recovery of lost or stolen firearms. This system is a key component of California's comprehensive approach to firearm regulation and public safety. Question 28. If a driver involved in a minor traffic collision in California exchanges information with the other party and believes there are no injuries, is it always necessary to call the police? A. Yes, police must always be called for any collision, no matter how minor. B. No, if there are no injuries and property damage is minor, drivers can often exchange information and report it to their insurance companies without police involvement. C. Only if one of the drivers has a concealed firearm. D. Only if there is damage exceeding $1,000. Answer: B. No, if there are no injuries and property damage is minor, drivers can often exchange information and report it to their insurance companies without police involvement. For minor traffic collisions in California where there are no apparent injuries and property damage is below a certain threshold, currently $1,000, drivers are often not legally required to call the police. In such cases, drivers can exchange insurance and contact information and report the incident directly to their respective insurance companies. However, if there are any injuries, significant damage, or disputes, calling law enforcement is highly recommended or legally required. Always use your judgment, and when in doubt, call 911 for guidance. Question 29. A California resident has a family member who they believe is an immediate danger to themselves or others due to a mental health crisis. Which legal action can a concerned family member initiate regarding firearm possession? A. Demand that law enforcement immediately seize all firearms without a court order. B. File for a gun violence restraining order, GVRO, with the court. C. Prohibit the family member from entering their home with a firearm. D. Report the family member to a private therapist only. Answer: B. File for a gun violence restraining order, GVRO, with the court. In California, if a family member believes another individual poses an immediate and significant danger to themselves or others due to a mental health crisis or other factors, they can petition the court for a gun violence restraining order, GVRO. This red flag law allows a court to temporarily prohibit the individual from possessing or acquiring firearms and can order the temporary removal of any firearms they already own. This process involves a judicial review to determine if there is sufficient evidence of an imminent risk. Question 30. Which of the following is a primary safety rule for handling any firearm, regardless of whether it is believed to be loaded or unloaded? A. Always keep your finger on the trigger, ready to fire. B. Always point the muzzle in a safe direction. C. Always keep the safety on, even when firing. D. Always assume the firearm is unloaded. Answer: B. Always point the muzzle in a safe direction. The most fundamental and critical firearm safety rule is to always point the muzzle in a safe direction. A safe direction is one where an accidental discharge would not cause injury to people or significant property damage. This rule applies universally, whether you believe the firearm is loaded or unloaded, as it acts as a fail-safe against the consequences of an unexpected discharge. Consistently following this rule, along with treating every firearm as if it's loaded, is paramount for preventing accidents.